Assuming that you are asked to install Azure Firewall, the Azure Firewall will help your organization to control inbound and outbound network access, which is an important part of an overall network security plan. Specifically, you would like to create and test the following infrastructure components. 1. A virtual network with a workload subnet and a jump host subnet. 2. A virtual machine in each subnet. 3. A custom route that ensures all outbound workload traffic from the workload subnet must use the firewall. 4. Firewall application rules that only allow outbound traffic to www.bing.com. And 5. Firewall network rules that allow external DNS server lookups. In order to accomplish this scenario, there are 7 tasks that I will perform. In task 1, I'm going to use a template to deploy the lab environment. In task 2, I'm going to deploy Azure Firewall. In task 3, I'm going to create a default route. In task 4, I'm going to configure an application rule. In task 5, I will configure a network rule. In task 6, I will configure DNS server. And in task 7, I'm going to test the firewalls. So the first thing I will do is to use the templates to deploy the environment. And that is what the task 1 is all about. So in task 1, I'm going to create a virtual machine by using the ARM template. In addition to the virtual machine, I'm also going to create the NSG. So basically, there will be 2 NSG, one for each of the virtual machine. The template will also create a virtual network that the 2 virtual machine will also be connected to. In order to accomplish that, I will come to the search and I will type deploy. Then I will select deploy a custom template. Then I will click build your own template in the editor. Then I will click load file. So I'm going to load my template. So the template is in my download section here in the AZ-500 master folder, and inside the all files labs, the template is inside the lab 08 folder. So I'll double click the template. Now I will save the template. Then I will go ahead and configure the remaining information like the resource group. So for the resource group, I'm going to use AZ-500 lab 03. And as for the password, I'm going to supply a secure password. Then I will click review plus create. So it's checking the information that I supply, and it's going to determine if the information that are supplied are in good condition. Now it's running the final validation. So anyway, for now, it will allow me to click the create button. Now the create button is enabled, so I will click the create button. Now it's initializing the deployment, and now it is submitting the deployment. So at this point, I'm going to pause this video and I'll be back once the deployment is complete. The deployment is complete now, so I'll go to the resource group. This will take me to the AZ-500 Lab 03 resource group. Now, these are the list of the resources that are deployed inside this resource group by that template that I deployed earlier. Now, in the list of the resources inside the resource group, I have SRV jump. It is a virtual machine. So what I'm going to do now is to open my whiteboard. So the first thing I will draw is the virtual machine. Then I also have network security group, and that is SRV jump NSG. Next in the list of the resources is SRV jump PIP. That's the public IP address of the SRV jump virtual machine. And SRV jump 121 is the network interface card of the SRV jump virtual machine. And the SRV jump OS disk 1 is the disk for the SRV jump. Next is another virtual machine, SRV work. And next is the SRV work NSG. Next is the network interface card of the SRV work and also the disk of the SRV work virtual machine. Do you notice that the SRV work virtual machine doesn't have a public IP address, unlike the SRV jump virtual machine that have a public IP address? This simply means that we cannot connect to this virtual machine from outside because it does not have a public IP address. It is only this virtual machine, SRV jump, that we can connect to from outside because it's the only one that have the public IP address. Now there's a connection between the SRV jump NSG and SRV jump virtual machine. There's also another connection between the SRV work NSG and the SRV work virtual machine. Now let's go back to the AZ-500 Lab 03. The last resource there is the virtual network, and the name of that virtual network is test FWVN. Test FWVN, that is a virtual network. Now click on the virtual network. I want to confirm the number of subnets. So I'll click on the subnet under the settings. Now, how many subnets do we have? 3. Azure Firewall subnet, workload subnet, and jump subnet. Now go back to the resource group. I'm going to click the first virtual machine, that's the SRV jump. I want to confirm the subnet that the SRV jump is. So SRV jump is in the jump subnet. So it simply means that there is a connection between the jump subnet and the SRV jump. Also, I'm going to look for the second virtual machine and I will click, and that's the SRV work. I also want to confirm the subnet, and that's the workload subnet. So workload subnet is connected to the SRV work virtual machine. So I'll go back to the AZ-500 Lab 03 resource group, and I'll click the SRV jump NSG. I want to look at the list of rules. Now for the inbound security rules, this is RDP, that is to allow RDP. And we also have other rules there. All these other rules are default rules. The only important rule there that's going to affect what we're about to do is the RDP, that is to allow the RDP. So I'm going to put that rule here as a label. But the first thing I will do is to divide this NSG into inbound and outbound. So it's time for us now to move to the task 2, where I will now deploy Azure Firewall. So in this task, I'm going to deploy Azure Firewall into the virtual network. So what I will do is to search for firewall, and I will select firewalls. Then the firewall manager, I'm going to click create so that I can create a new instance of Azure Firewall. So what is Azure Firewall? Azure Firewall is a managed cloud-based network security service that protects your Azure virtual network resources. It is a fully stateful firewall as a service with built-in high availability and unrestricted cloud scalability. You can centrally create, enforce, and log application and network connectivity policies across subscriptions and virtual networks. Azure Firewall uses static public IP address for your virtual network resources, allowing Azure Firewall to identify traffic originating from your virtual network. The service is fully integrated with Azure Monitor for logging and analytics. It simply means that Azure Firewall is a resource that we can use to protect our Azure virtual network. So what I'm going to do now is to select the resource group drop down and pick AZ-500 Lab 03 resource group. I will now move to the instance details. The first thing that I will need to do there is the name of the instance. For this Azure Firewall, I'll call it test-fw01. And in the region, I will use East US, and I will now move to the firewall SKU, where I will select standard as the SKU. Under the firewall management, I'm going to use this one, firewall rules classic, to manage the firewall. Then under the choose a virtual network, I'm going to use existing virtual network. In the drop down, I'm going to select the virtual network, that is the test FWVN, and in the public IP address, I'm going to create a new public IP address, and I will call it FW-PIP. Then I will click OK. Then I'll come to this tab, Review plus Create. Now it's checking the information. Now validation passed. So I'll now click the Create button so that I can create the firewall. It's now initializing the deployment and it's also submitting the deployment. So at this point, I'm going to pause this video and I'll be back once the deployment is complete. The deployment is complete, so I'll click Go to Resource. This will now take me to the test-fw01 resource, and that is our firewall. Please take note of the private IP address. and that is 10.0.1.4. I'm going to use this IP address later. So 10.0.1.4. That is the private IP address. So also take note that the firewall also contains a public IP address. Public IP address is important, it's compulsory whenever you are creating a firewall. But the one we are going to use as part of our configuration is a private IP address. Now I'll move to task 3. In task 3, I'm going to create a default route. So in this task, I'm going to create a default route for the workload subnet. The route will configure outbound traffic through the firewall. So what I will do is to come to the search and I will search for route table. And I will click route tables. Then I'll click create so that I can create a new route table. And in the route table, I'm going to select the subscription, so I'll leave it this way. For the resource group, I'm going to click the drop down and I will select AZ-500 Lab 03. Under the instance details, the region will be East US and the name of this route table will be firewall route. Then I will click review plus create. So it's running the final validation. Then I will click create. Now it's submitting the deployment. So while this is going on, I will switch back to the whiteboard. Now I've created two different resources now. Do you remember the two resources that I created? That is not part of the resources that we have in this whiteboard. That is the firewall and the route table. So I'm going to draw the firewall. What about the other resource? That is the route table. The next thing that I will do now is to go back to the portal. Now I will click go to resource. This will take me back to the AZ-500 Lab 03. And in the AZ-500 Lab 03, I'm going to look for the firewall route that I just created. And in the firewall route, I'll go to the settings. Under the settings, I'm going to click the subnet. And in the subnet, I'm going to associate this firewall route to my virtual network and to the workload subnet. Then I will click OK. I'm going to divide the firewall route into two, the subnet and the subnet now is what I just link to the workload subnet. Back into the firewall route. The next thing that I will do is to go to the route. And in the route, I'm going to add a route. And what is the name of the route? I'll call it FW-DG. And in the destination type, I will use IP addresses. In the destination IP, I will say 0.0.0.0/0. And the next op type will be virtual appliance. And the next op address is going to be the private IP address of the firewall. So I'm going to paste it here. Then I will click add. So let's go back to the diagram now. So here we have route, and we now have a route. Again, what's the name of the route? FWDG. The FWDG route is what I now link to the test firewall. Let's go back to the portal. Now I'll move to the task 4, where I'm going to configure application rule. In this task, I'm going to create an application rule to allow outbound access to www.bing.com. This will take me back to the firewall. So I'm going to look for the firewall here. And in the list of the firewall, I'm going to select test FW01. And in the settings, I'm going to click Route Classic. And in the Route Classic, there are 3 tabs here: NAT rule, Network rule collection, and application rule. So I'm going to go back now to the firewall, and I'll divide it into 3. The first one will be for the NAT rule. The second one is the network rule. And the third one is the application rule. So I'll go back to the portal. I'll click on the application rule, then I'll click add application rule collection. So the name of the application rule is app-COLL01. Priority is going to be 200. The action is to allow. Then I'll go to the target FQDN, and the name will be allow GH, and the source type will be IP address. The source itself is going to be 10.0.2.0/24, and the protocol is HTTP :80, HTTPS :443, and the site that I want to target is www.bing.com. Then I'll click add. So while it's still updating the firewall, I'll go back to the diagram, and in the application rule, I'm going to indicate the application rule that I just created now, app-COLL01. That is the application rule. And do you remember the essence of this application rule is to allow bing.com. Now I'll move to the task 5, where I will configure the network rule. In this task, I'm going to create a network rule that allows outbound access to two IP addresses on port 53. Port 53 is for DNS. So it is assumed that these two IP addresses that I'm about to supply under the network rule are IP addresses of DNS server. Although we don't have a DNS server here, so in case you want to configure something like this in your environment, it has to be the real IP address of DNS servers. So I'll click on the network rule and I will click add network rule. The name will be net-COWL01. The priority is 200 and the action is to allow. Then I'll go to the IP addresses where I will name it allow DNS, and for the protocol it will be UDP. The source type is IP address. The source is going to be 10.0.2.0/24, and the destination type is still going to be the IP address. The destination address is going to be 209.244.0.3, 209.244.0.4. For the destination port, is going to be port 53. Port 53 is for DNS. So I'll click add, and it's also updating the firewall. So while that is going on, I will go to the diagram again. Now I just created net-COLL01. Now go back to the portal. This will now take me to task 6, where I'm going to configure the virtual machine DNS servers. In this task, I'm going to configure the primary and secondary DNS addresses for the virtual machine. This is not actually a firewall requirement, it's an optional configuration. So I'm going to go to the SRV work, and that is the virtual machine. So I'll click on the SRV work. In the SRV work under the networking, I'm going to click network settings. In the network settings, I'm going to click this link under the network interface. Then in the settings, I'll click the DNS servers. Then in the DNS servers, I'll click custom. Then I'm going to add the two DNS server IP address 209.244.0.3, then 209.244.0.4. Then I'll click save. Now it's saving the network interface. Now it's actually ready. Now, updating the DNS servers for a network interface will automatically restart the virtual machine to which the interface is attached, and if applicable, any other virtual machines in the same availability set. Since we don't have the DNS server, so we're not going to see that. But if you are running it in a live environment where you have a DNS server and this IP addresses here are the IP address of DNS servers, you should expect the servers to restart. Now I'll move to the task 7 where I will now test the firewall. Before I test the firewall, let's go back to our diagram. Remember, I have two virtual machines, SRV jump and SRV walk. And the two virtual machine also has NSG. This SRV jump NSG is for the SRV jump virtual machine, while the SRV walk NSG is for the SRV walk virtual machine. This SRV jump virtual machine does contain a public IP address, but this one does not contain a public IP address. What it simply means is that I cannot even RDP into this from my system because there's no public IP address. So if I want to do anything inside this, since this one contains an IP address, that'll be the one I'm going to use. And also, if you look at the NSG, it allows RDP into this virtual machine. So what I will do now is that I'm going to RDP into this SRV jump virtual machine. Then through the SRV jump virtual machine, I will now RDP into the SRV walk virtual machine. Now, also remember that we have this virtual network. The virtual network has three subnets: Azure Firewall subnet, Jump subnet, and Workload subnet. So the SRV walk virtual machine is inside the Workload subnet, and the SRV Jump virtual machine is inside the Jump subnet. Then I now created a firewall that contains NAT rule, network rule, and application rule. For this configuration, we only make use of a network rule and application rule. Now, after that, I created a firewall route where I have a subnet and a route. Now, the subnet I configure is to link this firewall route into the workload subnet. It simply means that any resources that is connected to this subnet will route its information through what? The firewall. So the firewall will be the one to filter that information. It simply means that this virtual machine will be only able to browse www.bing.com. Remember the application rule that will configure. If you try to browse any other site on it, it will not allow it. And do also notice that I have to even create a route called FWDG so that I can link this route to the firewall. Let's now go back now to our portal. Now I'm going to look for the virtual machine again. That's the SRV jump virtual machine. Remember through the diagram, I said it's only through this that I can RDP. So I'm going to click on the connect and I'll click connect. So I'm going to click on the RDP file. The RDP file is ready. So I'm going to click on the connect and I'm going to supply the password. Then I'll click OK. Now it's connecting and I'll click yes. So it's connecting now to the virtual machine. Now I'm going to right click the start button and I'll click run. Now I want to RDP into the work virtual machine from the jump virtual machine. So I will type MSTSC stage space slash V column SRV hyphen work. Then I will click OK. Now it's asking me now to provide a username. I'll use a local admin and the password. I'll click OK. Then I'll say yes. So now I've RDP into the SRV work virtual machine through the SRV jump virtual machine. Now I'll click local user. What I want to do now is to test the sites that I allow through the firewall. And you remember the site, the bing.com. So the first thing I want to do is to off this IE security configuration. I'm going to off it. Then I'll click OK. Now I will launch Internet Explorer. Then I'm going to type www.bing.com. Now press enter. Now we can access bing.com. Let's try another site. Let's say Microsoft, www.microsoft.com. And I'll press enter. Look at the information. Deny. The reason is this: no rule matched. So it simply shows that what we configure is working. Remember, we said that this virtual machine, SRV work, must route its information through what? The firewall. And in the firewall, we configure the application rule that only allow this site, and it will definitely disallow every other site. Thank you for watching. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing to this channel. Please, let me know what you think in the comment section. And do not forget to leave a like and share this video. See you in the next one.